Trickle in. So my name is Zach Carson. Welcome everyone to the final day of the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium brought to you by the Cannabis Certification Council. This is the 5th year we are doing this event, and this year with over 130 speakers and over 45 panelists. It's really been a remarkable week, bringing up a really holistic perspective of sustainability in an emerging industry, touching on issues of environmental, social justice, health and wellness, community, and bottom line business. Really just some of the leading experts and thought leaders in the industry have blessed us with their experience and their presence. So for all of you who've been here, hope you've been enjoying it. I know I sure have learned a ton. This being the last day, I would love to get going to introduce our next panel and some of our panelists. This panel is called Social Benefit Programs in Cannabis. And the description is: the growth of legal cannabis has come with complications related to prior prohibition of cannabis that has disproportionately and adversely impacted people in communities of color. In an attempt to counter this history of disparity, many states, cities, and businesses have implemented social equity programs connected to the legalization of medical or recreational cannabis. This panel will discuss some of the social issues that have risen to the surface during the transition into legal markets and highlight various solutions that have emerged. And with that, really excited to welcome Luna Stower, who will be our moderator, as well as Ryan Miller, Alex De La Campa, and Ramon Garcia. And just to give a quick introduction to Luna, our moderator, Luna is an industry-leading brand architect and business strategist in global wellness and the cannabis brand space. She's been guiding companies with sales management, social media campaigns, marketing strategy, social impact programs. She has helped lead some of the top brands in California and has worked with brands well beyond that. She's also known for her extensive government relations and high-level regulatory work, and has been an outspoken advocate for equity and alternative plant medicine access. So Luna really was helpful in putting this panel together and bringing these wonderful guests. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you. Just so you know, before I do that, all the attendees, if you do have questions, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to hit on that, and I know the attendees will be, and the moderators will be looking at that. So feel free to do that. This is being recorded, and I'll see you guys in a little bit. Have a wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Zach. Welcome, everyone. It looks like there's a couple people in the space, maybe more if I'm not seeing, but welcome. Thank you for coming. I know that this has probably been a really long week of panels, so we're really excited to get right down to brass tacks with this one. We have people that are on the ground doing the real work. I will start with Ryan Miller. He is the founder and lead facilitator, magic man of Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis. Ryan has been an incredible advocate, outspoken on the government level, the brand level, and the spirit level, protesting all sorts of human rights and medical rights issues. He is a San Leandro native, born and raised. San Leandro, what? And he is an incredible facilitator of support groups for veterans, where they give out compassionate cannabis. They do, they ask a prompt, they check in with each other, and then they end with a yoga nidra eye rest, and sometimes some sound therapy or some art therapy. They do community cleanups, and they also do hikes with veterans, walk and talk. And we're really excited to have Ryan. Ryan is a really well-known and respected panelist and speaker in this space. He's a thought leader. He is an accountability master and an incredible ally to all folks, Indigenous, people of color, women, and marginalized folks. So he's also been a major part of the decriminalize movement for plant medicine, and also for the equity movement for folks of color here in the Bay who deserve a fair crack at this incredible industry that we're also attracted to and love so much. That brings me to Alex de la Campa, who is the founder and CEO of A Future for Veterans Foundation. They are a nonprofit 501c3 organization that provides housing assistance and reintegration services, including op-evac support groups and veteran walk and talk hikes, based here in the Bay Area, and has been really instrumental to a lot of the work that people are able to do, you know, bridging the social benefit programs with the 501c3. And he's going to really get into the ins and outs of what it means to be a nonprofit in this space. We're really, really lucky to have him. He has had this nonprofit for a little over 5 years, and it has not been an easy road. So help me in welcoming Alex de la Campa, first generation, born from a first generation Mexican immigrant, first in his family to graduate from college, and wants to support other veterans doing the same. Ryan, who was a military veteran, a Marine Corps veteran, and Alex is served 4 years in the Navy. And then we have Ramon Garcia. He is an incredible equity warrior. He's one of the original founders of the original equity group in San Francisco, known as the Equity Sessions. He has been instrumental to building Padre Mu out as a Bay Area and soon to be statewide distribution and delivery service, and is the founder of an incredible POC owned and run farm, Sanctuary Farms, up in Northern California. So this man touches everything from seed to sale and beyond. He is at every event. You'll always see him outspoken, confident, multiracial, multi-spiritual, and is just always positive. He is a survivor of the drug war. He also lives in chronic pain and has a severe disability that renders him really, it makes it very hard for him to work. So we always really are very grateful when he's in spaces with us, because it is not easy living with spinal pain. And Alex and I definitely both understand that. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, cannabis as medicine isn't just something that we do as a job. It's something that we bring our own stories and our own healing to it, which is why we can, you know, ride these really almost like borderline abusive waves of this industry and how it's being regulated. So welcome, Ramon Garcia. We love you. We're so honored to have you. So the way that we wanted to do this is to kind of talk about the problem that we see, the solutions that we see, and the next steps and action steps that folks listening can take to help these organizations as they are really move forward and actually complete our missions instead of just talking about them, because we really need help and support from the greater community. So the first question I'll ask, and I guess we can just maybe take it in that order, Ryan, Alex, and then Ramon. Like, what's the main problem that you see? Obviously, we know that there's corporate social responsibility, you know, initiatives that everyone wants to take, everyone wants to give back. Either they're doing it for a very tokenized PR kind of optics perspective, and there's like a spectrum in between. And then there's people who literally are like, I don't care about my financial bottom line. All I care about is at the end of the day what the legacy I'm leaving with this company, and very, very, very conscious capitalism. And then there's obviously things in between. So, you know, Ryan will hopefully can speak a little bit more to like the compassionate access side, Alex more to the issues of being a nonprofit, and then the equity perspective from Ramon.
Yeah, thank
you.
you.
Basically the major challenges.
Sure. So the major challenge prior to SB 34 was access to gifting, was access to the charitable, non-commercial exchange of cannabis between, you know, companies and end users. When we essentially eliminated the medical model with Proposition 64 in California and went for adult use, it essentially eliminated compassionate gifting of cannabis. And so with SB 34, we lobbied and we got the governor to sign it last year. And now we have compliant gifting and charitable access to cannabis. And so now the biggest problem now is buy-in, right? Getting companies to ensure that this cornerstone of the culture of California cannabis is infused in their values as an organization. And, you know, Alex and I are in a yoga teacher training right now, and there's 3 aspects of living, right, that I'm learning. And the first one is tamas. And tamas is basically lethargy, really not doing anything, right? And that's one way that a company can go, right? Is just our bottom line, profit over everything, growth, growth, growth. And then there's rajas, which is kind of what you mentioned, Luna, this tokenizing aspect. And this is basically ambition toward um, that recognition that you're talking about. Yes, I'm going to have a corporate social responsibility plan. However, I'm going to have to maximize and extract all of the public relations benefit that I can. And often we're going to put handcuffs on the nonprofit or the charitable organization. We're going to restrict uh, their voice in a lot of ways, and what they do with that funding, for example. And then there's sattva, and sattva, two T's, is this basically selfless service, right? This giving without any expectation of reciprocation. And before SB 34 was implemented, when all of our donations were under the table, so to speak, it was anonymous gifting. We couldn't blast the brands on social media because it put their licenses at risk. We couldn't give them that public relations benefit because it was illegal. And so that is the anonymous gifting, the selfless service, I think, is the highest form of basically human existence. And these corporations and your company can also exist in that way if you choose to, and if it's important to you.
Thank you. That's very well said. I really love that you're bridging yogic principles to this, because, I was in a talk yesterday where someone asked me about, how, what it means to be successful in this space. And I said, just be aware of your canna karma, because it's a boomerang and it's going to come around and hit you on the tush like it has MedMen and Ignite. So watch yourself, because karma is a real thing. So it's interesting we're bringing in kind of these principles, these ancient principles. Alex, how about you? What's it been like trying to operate a nonprofit in a space that no one wants to touch cannabis? It's 501c3 is a federal designation, and we're under Schedule 1, which means that we're not recognized as having any medical efficacy, and we're considered highly addictive and a controlled substance. What's that been like?
Oh, it's been a lot of fun navigating this space. I just want to give a shout out to Ryan Miller, as a military veteran myself, who's been homeless, dealt with substance abuse, everything, connecting with Operation EVAC, and as long as he's been doing it, and as much I've learned during this process, he's a good one to have on your team, as well as Ramon Garcia. Whenever you enter a room, you know that the conversations you want to have, you're not the only one who wants to have them. So he's a really, really good ally to have, and we do share that back pain. So it's a good practice in empathy to see him and these kind of things. And Luna Stour, the Queen of Cannabis, thank you for putting this panel together. Hello everybody, good to be here. Yeah, I think the issues, not only that what Ryan was mentioning, the move to SB 34, and now the desire for companies to really highlight this process of social responsibility is not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. It's when you try to extract value, as much value from these nonprofits as possible, especially in the space that we are existing in. So these companies, cannabis companies in particular, is very difficult to get tax deductions, right? The money that they're working with is not accessible in most financial banking institutions. Like they're dealing with a lot as well. And so trying to find the balance in an industry that is brand new, that is not technically sanctioned by the federal government, right, creates a lot of barriers. Now, on the completely other side, where as a 501c3, where I am able to work with companies to allow them tax deductions and everything like that, as well as individuals, there's a lot of companies out there who are still stuck in the miseducation of what cannabis is as a plant and as a medicine, and do not want to work with companies that work in cannabis, especially companies who are working in the social benefit space. They just don't see or don't want to put their 501c3 certification at risk. What I do in the provision of housing, in the provision of services, and the provision of peer support is we're focused on the elements that we can control, the most common denominators: food, shelter, water, right? And from there, we're working with organizations like Operation EVAC, organizations like Padre Mu, which Ramon Garcia runs, organizations like Veterans Walk and Talk, to provide these outlets for veterans, right? So that they can, we look at cannabis as a tool, right? It's a tool in your tool belt. And we need to open up access to these tools, especially to our veterans, right? Because they're known as the canaries in the coal mine. The things that affect veterans, the things that affect elderly, the things that affect children, affect them faster than they affect the general population. And so the faster we can get these medicines and these tools in the hands of veterans and the people who really need them, low income, people of color, elderly, disabled, the faster we will get into alignment with this ebb and flow of philanthropy, of capital, of eyes, you know, in the social media world that we live in. So thank you. It's good to be here. Really good to be here.
Snaps.
Thank
All
you
right,
guys.
Ramon.
Thank you guys.
What's it like being an equity leader in this space? What's it like trying to get, you know, folks to throw folks a bone, you know, in this crazy atmosphere where everyone has a scarcity mindset, right? Even people who were really well capitalized, they either do have it, but are so worried about losing it that they're pretending like they don't have it and operating with scarcity, or they really don't have it and are operating in scarcity. How do we flow the abundance to equity in this time of austerity?
Yeah, I think it's funny when you talk about that, the main problems and what the problems are. I think, you know, we get caught up in our little bubbles, but to take it to a wider perspective, like the problems that we're having are a direct, like the direct impact of decades of, you know, corporate America, corporate greed. And we see it in all aspects of our society, whether it's our food production, whether it's, you know, our water, our environment, our healthcare, like all of those things that are prevalent in just our main society are going to be even more impacted when we're talking about this community. So like equity and compassion were the backbones of why politicians stood on their pulpit and pushed, you know, pushing this into this Prop 64, this legal industry. And, you know, of course, people like Ryan and myself and others knew that that was the lip service for them to pass this and get to their ultimate goal, which was to make money and extract taxes and control it, right? And in a lot of ways recriminalize this plant in a way that, you know, yes, you might not go to jail, but you're going to be in debtor's prison in the same way. And so the problems that we're having with compassion and with equity are direct reflections of the problems that we're having in society. The systemic oppressive systems that set it up for some people to succeed and some people not to. And so, like when we talked about compassion and equity on the state level or in any other level, you're talking about things that cost money. And with corporate America, if it costs money, they're not going to do it, regardless of the impact of it, what it could have in our community, regardless of the impact of what it could have for your health and our economic state as, you know, as these communities. It's all about, you know, their control and their systems and who has access to that, right? And so, like when the civil rights era ended, in, you know, when they no longer could oppress based on race, religion, and sex, they just made it barriers to economic entry, right? Education, access to education, and those things that would give you that access to economic, you know, generational wealth and those other things. So that's where we are today, right? And so, like what Ryan and Alex and myself are talking about are things that are gonna make our community better, but it's gonna take the commitment of the community and everybody to push these larger organizations to make that community, make that commitment to reinvest in those communities that support them. And so ultimately, Like the problems that we have in the equity community are the same problems and challenges that everybody on this panel is having, is access to those resources. It's the damage that was done and put us behind in terms of true equal access, right? And true equality and equity, you know, and the challenges of trying to convince people that their ROIs are going to be better because if they invest in the community, because we're going to invest in them.
You know, it's funny. I always say love is lucrative, and I think that that really speaks to that kind of that triple bottom line. Everyone's really great about making sure that their payroll is paid and that their pockets are lined. But going back to that legacy, what's the legacy? And like you said, the legacy of Jim Crow and racism in this country wasn't really to shift anything. It was just to go underground with it and to kind of cover it up a little bit more. So we want to. It sounds like the common theme is, you know, being honest, radical honesty, like stop being like stop having these, you know, virtue signaling. And we saw this a lot with the Black Lives Matter. Putting a black square on your screen was supposed to be some kind of solidarity, and then you went on as business as usual, and it's almost more harmful than not doing anything at all, because you feel like you checked this box, and once the box checked, you get to disengage. And so it sounds like engagement, community engagement, and really turning the screw on some of these politicians to actually, you know, it's like you used our name and our, you know, our language to pass these things for yourself. Don't leave us behind. And I know Ryan's, you know, really well known for saying that too. Like, thanks for not leaving us behind. I mean, this is an issue of, like you said, you know, who has access to these things. It's pretty clear who has access to these structural privileges. So it sounds like we have a pretty good idea of some of the issues. What are some of the solutions that you've seen are working, that you're excited about, things that we are doing really well, things that people can kind of sink their teeth into, which will lead us into our next question about like physical actions that people can do. But in more of just like the general scale, what are ways that we are winning? What are ways that we can talk about our successes as a model, so hopefully other folks watching can say, okay, I'm seeing my kind of like, I can see myself reflected in this, or seeing kind of that there's some inertia happening. What are the ways that either you've kind of shucked and jived and gotten around some of these barriers, or what are some ways that you've seen people really show up and kind of come through in the clutch? You can take it, Rye.
Well, there's this quote: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this is something I learned is in business school, it's all, you know, competitive advantage. Well, I think the future of transactions, right, and success is going to be collaborative and cooperative advantage. And so through the collaborations with, you know, the Future for Veterans Foundation and Padre Mu, we've been able to create this pipeline of philanthropy. We have distributors, we have manufacturers, we have farmers, and we have retail outlets that in every step of the supply chain that are willing to make compassion, make this charitable exchange of cannabis products as part of their mission. And it's without that cohesiveness, without that collective commitment, we wouldn't be anywhere. And so I really got to thank, you know, Ramon and Padre Mu for really making that happen. And last Sunday, their owner delivered care packages, generous care packages, 4 ounces each to all of our troops. And all of our community is really low income elders, veterans of color. And so this is just abundant blessings. And so really what's so inspiring about this new reality is that, you know, as a far leftist, anti-corporate citizen, I'm really encouraged that we can have the resources of industry like behind us and supporting us now, and we can benefit from all the abundance that brings. And so really it's community, and without that, you know, none of this would be possible. So
Yeah, man. Glad to be in community with you, brother. I agree, the idea of collaboration and community. I really like what Ryan said about going fast alone or going far together. And I think like basically the solution is kind of what we're putting together, right? So this 501c3 that we have is basically a vehicle for corporate responsibility and these cannabis social benefit programs to access capital, right? So, and I think specifically what a Future for Veterans Foundation is doing is really taking the question that we have, right, which is how do we get this plant to the people who need it, right, or make it available just in general, legally. And I think it's almost, that question almost relates to telling someone to exercise, right? You need to move more, okay? But that is only half the question, because the other half of the question is, how do we get people to move better, right? Not just move more, but to move better. So in this sense, it's not just how do we get this medicine to the people who need it, but how do we then create the set and setting for this medicine to actually be used properly, right? The education that comes along with it, the knowledge and the self-intrinsic value that comes along with it. So with the Future for Veterans Foundation, that's what we're trying to do, is be able to create that set and setting, right? For us to then access these plants, access these medicines, access these social benefit programs with integrity and purpose. And so, you know, like California is a very special state in this union when it comes to cannabis federalization, you know, cannabis legalization and decriminalization, right? We're not descheduled yet. And so I think these programs that we're working with, these partnerships that we have are very unique and very interesting, and hopefully they can become models through which other people can do this.
Be the model, be the model. It's funny because we had this conversation a little bit on Meadowlands when we were talking about compassion, and you know, although I definitely appreciate the shout outs and for what we've done at Padre Mu with compassion, that was spearheaded by Aaron Ash, you know, one of the majority owner in Padre Mu, and like that was something that was deeply connecting for him to do. When that SB 34 came out, we didn't ask. Like I heard a lot of people asking, how do we do this? Right? We didn't ask how we do this. We just said, we're gonna do this. And we weren't afraid to make mistakes along the way. Like we just said, we're gonna do this. Okay, how do we, you know, designate stuff as being compassion, and then how do we filter that to the retail, and then how do we get that to the consumers, right? And so that's where we were like, look, let's deal with the organizations that are already dealing with those folks. People like Operation EVAC, people like Alex over here, people like Weed for Warriors and Sweet Leaf Joe. They were already doing the work. So how do we connect them to these products? And like literally when we're talking about like some of the things that the wins that we had, it doesn't take a lot of money. That didn't take a lot of money for us. It took a personal sacrifice of time and energy. It took that want to actually make a difference and go out there and figure out how we're gonna do it. It took a little bit of empathy to understand that even with my own disabilities, I understand that there's a lot of people that are way worse than me. And so I'm always looking at how can I impact them? What am I going through? And knowing that other people are going through something worse. It's the same tack that I take with the equity. Like when Nina Parks and Amber Center and Andrea Unsworth and, you know, Sunshine Lencho were up there like advocating for equity and inclusivity on state levels with, you know, $100,000, you know, lobbyists and lawyers. We weren't asking, we were demanding, we were like being that voice. Like we were just saying, like, we don't have all the answers, but we know this is right. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And that needs to be built into the foundation of everything we do. And so that's part of what I'm doing with the equity trade certification, is like building that value and voting with your dollar. It seems like we've seen the protests, we've seen the places burning down, and what is their response? Their response is more violence and brutality. Their response is they don't care about anything but their money. And so now we use that as the tool for our uprising. We vote with our dollar. We do business with purpose, regardless of what that takes, right? It's empowering leadership within those communities and giving them, like Alex said, the tools that they need to impact their communities. That's what we do at OEG when it comes to equity. And like I said, I've always felt like equity and compassion, they're tied together because it's the same thing. Like we're just talking about equal access to those tools that we desperately need to be able to exist and be healthy in our communities.
Yeah, and this is an existential crisis. This is not just something that we're like, oh, wouldn't this be cute if we like did a beach cleanup? It's like, no, this is like Ryan was saying, these are elders of color who have no income. These are people who are dying alone. These are people who have a history of self-harm. These are people who, otherwise might be being prescribed something by the VA that gives them psychosis. I mean, these are interventions that are just as important as what an EMT or a paramedic does, right? So
and I just want to just really quick mention like why another piece of why I go so hard for people like Ryan and Sean Kiernan and Alex, and when we're dealing with healing of our veterans, and it has to do with the issue of PTSD, and literally it's the same effects that young Black and brown folks have when they see death every day in their communities and they see violence and oppression. The same tool that's going to help these veterans is the same tools that are going to help these folks. So like that health of our community, it's connected, it's tied. It's the same system that is causing all these oppressive pieces in all of our communities. It's the same system. Like what Ryan is fighting in the African American community and Latino community and Native American community, Asian community, LGBTQ community are fighting. They're fighting against the same oppressive system. And the moment that we recognize that and combine our fight and realize the commonality between all of our battles and all of our, pain, that's the point that we really will start getting the backing of our community and really start like making that substantive change.
Yes, sir. You're talking right. That's what I'm saying. You can't, when you walk into a room with this man, like the conversations that are going to be had are just beautiful. And I just want to reiterate on what he is saying and add to that as me and myself and Ryan sitting here today, we recognize that we identify as veterans, which just happens to be another label that gets added to the exact communities that we're talking about. Lower socioeconomic, Black and brown, right, immigrant communities. The ones that are experiencing the worst effects have experienced the worst effects of the war on drugs and currently experience these things, happen to pull from those communities to put our ranks of the military, bolster our military ranks, right? So it's not a coincidence, right, that you're speaking truth to power right now, Ramon. I mean, this is the way of the world. And I just want to say what Ramon was saying about the access, what it took is time and energy, right? And it took him caring. And I just want to say that Ramon and Ryan have done so much work in this space to find out who cares, right? Who has military in their family, who cares, who is willing to give that time and energy. That takes connection, that takes community, that takes exactly what we're talking about in the professional realm, right? And so I just want to shout them out for both doing that work for the past 5-6 years.
Absolutely. And also like going into that common integration, it's no surprise that veterans that Black and brown kids, usually from low income areas, are targeted by recruiters. So the Black and brown community having inner city violence and that kind of trauma, and then the trauma from going to war, they would have gotten it either way. Like you're either, if you stay at home, you're going to get it. And if you go abroad, you're going to get it, because you've been, when you're born poor into a capitalist system like this, you are only really meant to extract labor from and to fight rich men's wars. I mean, this has been the story since the beginning of time. We have an interesting question before we go to next steps of like how people can get involved and what what we can actually sink our teeth into. We have an attendee that asked, beyond providing care packages with medicine, how do our social benefit programs include medical services where professionals can help people work through their emotional or medical issues with the assistance of cannabis? So it's not so easy to, my answer would be, just like Alex mentioned about how nonprofits get very gun shy around, they're like, whoa, you touch cannabis? There's a lot of people who just don't, they just throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're like, even if there's some benefit here, there's just, I'm triggered personally, or someone on my team is, or we're going to lose a funder, or this is going to be bad PR, and they just don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Same thing happens with a lot of medical providers. So sometimes we can get doctors to, give out recommendations, and nurses, but it's hard to really get them to be like, I am a nurse with this company, because they're very nervous about losing their licenses. So an example is Sharon Bertrand is an amazing retired nurse, and she works with the Act Now program through what used to be Prana Medicinals, which is now Advesa Wellness. And they have an ability for folks to sign up for this program, and she will actually walk you through regimens with their products. And then there are a lot of CannaMed, like CannaMed Nurse is online. Nurse Heather Manis, she does consulting as well. And usually there is someone, a point person at a lot of either delivery services. They'll be on the phone, and they have really excellent, they're not medical providers, just like people say, I'm not a real lawyer, but they can still give you some legal advice. We do know how to use these. We've been practicing with this medicine in a semi-regulated market for 30 years. And so we do know how it works with insomnia. We do know how it works with seizure. We do have a lot of anecdotal and clinical trials coming out of Israel and other places that are allowed to test on this. So we do have a lot of online resources and stuff like that too. So I don't know if you guys know of any good opportunities, but those are just kind of, from my experience, you're kind of relying pretty heavily on the place that you're getting it from. Hopefully there's a lead bud tender that's been really well trained.
Also, in our practice at Operation EVAC, it's a 90-minute session. In the cannabis portion of the distribution and the education on consumption is only 10 minutes of it. The first hour, we sit in circle, we share stories, we form positive narratives about our experiences. It's an exercise in public speaking, which is both a social and employable skill. And then after the cannabis distribution, which is, again, is only 10 minutes, 20 minutes is dedicated to meditation, right? And so in our practice, cannabis is like bait. It gets the veteran to come in, hey, I'm gonna get some free weed. Awesome, I'm not gonna have to rely on my VA prescriptions so much. I'm not gonna have to rely on alcohol or street drugs so much. But then, hey, once I get here, I'm gonna meet other veterans. I'm gonna hear the stories of others that have experienced and overcame similar struggles that I am. I'm gonna meditate. I'm gonna learn how to manage my emotional wellness better. I'm gonna learn how to sleep better. And so yes, cannabis is a super important part of our practice, and it's a small piece of the overall wellness puzzle.
Absolutely. Goes back to answering that question. Once you get them access, how do you support it, right? And I dropped in a chat. I just wanted to highlight leaf411.org. They're out of Colorado. They provide free, basically a hotline for people to call in about cannabis and connect with registered nurses. It's a really, I met the CEO during the NJ BizCon, one of these things. And she's amazing. Her name is Catherine, I believe. And they're doing really good work. So that is a good example of professional services giving access to that kind of support.
Yeah, and that definitely has been a delicate thing within the community of trying to get those outside professional services to commit themselves within the cannabis space. So, I definitely echo what Luna's saying, but ultimately what we've had to do is just like the rest of this fight with equity and with compassion is we've had to rely on our community. We have a lot of professionals within the space that really understand how to connect the two, whether it's, whether it's massage therapy, whether it's, just different practices and tools to deal with mental health and like Ryan said, meditation and those other things. Those are all tools that I use for pain management. Even within the regular medical community, they teach you, when you're dealing with chronic pain, the part of your mind that deals with pain, that registers pain and puts that through your body, where it can't exist at the same time as the part of your mind that registers joy or happiness. And so in chronic management, they teach you, how to use those tools to be able to lower the levels of your pain and deal with it. And that's what Ryan is teaching. That's what Alex is helping teach, like those, putting together this toolbox of all these tools. Cannabis is a piece of that tool. Like I use it as a topical, as an edible, smoke it when I need a little bit more, or, all those things. But it's in line with how I move, how I stretch, how I breathe, sometimes taking meditation, taking the time out to lie down, like all those things that help me. Like I did 13 years on 90 milligrams of morphine every 6 hours. Like it almost destroyed my life. And I'm not a person that just takes it like that, right? And so now, people ask me, oh, is cannabis the magic medicine? No, it's not. It can be a magic, like a big piece of that tool that helps you deal with that pain. But we have to be able to teach our communities the entire toolbox so people can apply it the way they need to.
Love it. Awesome. Cool. So it looks like we have another 18 minutes or so. The last 4 minutes, Zach will hop in. So for the last 10, 15 minutes, let's talk about some next steps. Yeah, we have, Keshav says, knowledge is the remedy always. Yeah, and something I want to add to that too is, someone who did in-store brand ambassador events for brands for the last 5 years in cannabis retail settings, I started realizing like, I don't really want to ask you if you're a sativa, indica, or hybrid person. I want to know your health goal. Are you trying to sleep better? And it might not have anything to do with cannabis. Maybe you're on your screen too late. Maybe you're eating too late. Maybe you're getting in arguments with your partner before bed. Like there's so many other parts of sleep hygiene that you don't even really, it's like cannabis is like Alex said, it's just a tool in the tool belt. And I think that our role as cannabis people and medicine people and healers is not really about idolizing and romanticizing cannabis as being the panacea for everything. That's what people keep misunderstanding. That people think that if they do that, they're going to get richer or something, or that they're going to make people believe in it more. We just need to be experts in healing in general. We need to add value to the mindfulness and the healing space in general. Cannabis is one of the many things that we use for that. And we love it because it's brought us together and we're able to actually make a living off of it. So it's the topic of conversation, but it's not the end all be all. So, I want each of you guys to spend about 5 minutes talking about what you think is like we talked about the barriers, we talked about the things that are working. What are ways that people can really show up, show out? Who do they write to? Who do they talk to? Where can they come to meetings? How can they physically help you, whether it's a hike or a support group or donations or, we can do it. We can do more at the end about, we can talk more about each of our websites and things like that. But right now, as far as like into the grit of day to day of like, how can I, as someone who's watching this either live or in perpetuity, what email can I write? Where can I donate? Where can I show up? Can I attend an op-evac meeting? When Padre Moo does the next drop-off, how can I get involved? What is a Future for Veterans working on? How can I, contact people to say, hey, I have a nonprofit that you might want to work with. And how can we use this moment to really network and try to actually level us up?
Well, I really appreciate everyone's attention during this time. And Luna, you're doing a fantastic job moderating this. And I think, the best thing that we can do for veterans is to stop creating them. And simply how anti-racism is, a huge, relevant, important issue in America, how come anti-war isn't anymore? Like, what happened to the anti-war movement? And so we can't really, put all these band-aids on veterans, whether it's cannabis, whether it's psychedelics, whether, whatever it may be, without looking at the root cause, which is war. And if your company is investing in, defense companies, right? If you're not being mindful of where you're sourcing your inputs, you're part of the problem. And if you're really not doing something, if you're not actively anti-racist, then you're actively racist, right? Or you're maintaining these systems, right? There's no neutrality on a moving train. And so if you're not actively anti-war, then your complacency and your apathy is directly contributing to war. And so, yes, because of the militarization of America, there's going to be a lot of veterans to serve. So folks like me and Alex are always going to have a strong supply of, constituents to care for. But really, like, I don't want to be in this business forever. I'd love to see an end to war. And that's, I think, the future, like the dream future is that we as a community are more mindful of our consumption choices. We're more mindful of our apathy, our complicity in the gears of war, because like what Ramon was saying, the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex intersect in the same low income communities. And so for those of us by privilege escape the school to prison pipeline, we're funneled into violent servitude to clamber toward this myth of upward social mobility. And there's a lot of harm in that. And, America does a great job at sending troops to war and winning battles. Been doing it forever. We don't do such a great job at welcoming home the troops. Beyond the tokenism that Luna mentioned, like putting a yellow ribbon on your car, or waving your little flag, or getting a little vet pet like Operation Evac so that you can put on your little social media blasts. And so really, like, in the most militaristic country in the face of the earth, what are you doing to stop war? And what are you doing to welcome home warriors?
We got, well said. Yeah, I agree with everything that Ryan said, and then, then if I was to move forward on that comment, it would be to expand on the idea of the trouble with welcoming veterans home, right? Or preparing them to thrive, to prosper, to, do what they went out to protect, whatever it is that they're supposed to do, right? So, for me, like I'll use Operation Evac as an example. A lot of the veterans that we serve, right, especially in our in some of our support groups in certain areas, a lot of them are lower income. A lot of them are on fixed incomes. A lot of them live in affordable or subsidized housing. A lot of them are past prime working ages, right? Like these are facts that they live with. And, then you have to deal with if they're living in subsidized housing and affordable housing, there is another barrier to accessing this medicine because they can't even utilize the medicine, let's say plant or vape or whatever to the effect, because they could be evicted from their homes, right? Which is a huge issue when it comes to low income, disabled, elderly, who are the prime beneficiaries, again, right? The most at-risk populations who benefit the most from this plant as medicine. So like everybody who's aware of the Federal Controlled Substances Act, right? Which basically creates the schedule 1, schedule 2, all the way down to 5 and then gives the DEA and the FDA the right to control and regulate that. What people don't really know about is the Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act, which basically mandates that Section 8 subsidized housing, VA, right, outpatient care, they cannot get permission to utilize cannabis in that housing. They'll be subject to eviction, fine, whatever. So that is, for me, in my military career, in my experience, I really sit strongly on the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: food, shelter, and water. You satisfy those three things, then you work on the next set of needs. And so that's what we're doing, is we're trying to our best to work on satisfying that food, shelter, and water, so that these veterans, as they come home, whichever tool they use in their tool belt supports that growth and reintegration and doing whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing in this moment. So I really think the onus sits on the federal government. I think the onus also sits on us to read our ballots, to understand what our responsibility is, not only to vote, but what we are voting on and why. There was a comment earlier, knowledge is the best medicine always, right? So yeah, I'll stick with that.
Awesome. So we have 5 minutes left. Ramon, if you want to keep your remarks about 3.5, 4, and then we'll have everyone just quickly say their contact information. And also I put Alex's in the chat. Ramon has his in the chat. And I believe Ryan's is as well.
The two before me definitely said it very well. The only thing I would add to that is just, we have a responsibility to engage, not just a message on Facebook or Instagram. Engage physically, like get involved in your local policies, get involved in federal policies. We have the Moores Act that's up on federal legislation right now that can, help get rid of some of those boundaries. We need folks to engage, even if it's on the most, local level as possible. Like, we need our community, and you have a responsibility. Like, the federal government and our leaders in place, they act like they are the power, but you give them that power by either speaking or not speaking. If you don't speak, you give them the power to do whatever they want and feed corporate interests. And if you speak up, then they have to respond. And so there is this myth that your vote doesn't count. Your vote and voice counts. Let's gather it. Let's speak loud. Get up off your couch and do something. Like, we have, a lot of legislation that's on the board, but also just support. Go to your local store. Ask them if they carry equity products. Ask them what their compassion program is. Put that pressure on.
All right, we just got word that we have 55 seconds to wrap up.
Put the pressure on.
Don't worry about that. I'll put all the information in the chat, but thank you everyone so much for your words. All of us are super accessible. We can keep this conversation going forever. So Ryan at opevac.org, Alex at afutureforvets.org, and Ramon.
You can see me at Original Equity Group or Equity Trade Certification at Gmail, Instagram, all those.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. Luna for hosting and bringing these amazing people together, and for Ramon and Ryan and Alexander for sharing your stories and just speaking so much truth to not only your experience, but for the potential and the hopes that we have for how to really have true impact with a plant that is sort of begging and has continuous to push us to do it justice through the community and health and mental and wellness justice that so needs to come through. So really, really loved learning more about all of you guys. And once again, thank you.